Bob, Bob Scott, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, and so, Bob, could you introduce yourself and say where you're calling or where you're at right now and how you got into the Calexit movement, and then roughly what you'd like to talk about today?
Well, I normally live in San Francisco. I'm actually visiting a family right now in the Las Vegas area, flying back tomorrow. But I've lived in the Bay Area for 27 years. What brought me out here was my career. I graduated with a degree in IT from New York, where I grew up. Came and worked for Apple. That lasted a couple of years, and then I got a job in healthcare IT. And I've been in healthcare IT for over about 25 years now. So I do have a lot of experience with it. Um, my background, like I said, I grew up in New York. My father I was an immigrant from Ireland. I have family over there as well as Canada. I've lived in Australia. And I travel a lot around the world, both business and pleasure. So I'm pretty familiar with the way healthcare works, not only in this country, but also in other countries like Canada and Ireland and a few other countries. Some friends in Germany and Sweden and Spain. What got me to the Calexit movement, I think, is a growing frustration with the way the federal government works, the inequities of the whole federal system, not just the electoral college, but also the Senate being unfair, corruption, gerrymandering, and it seems like nothing gets done. And California, maybe it's too big to govern, and there's a lot of historic baggage there too that is causing a lot of divisions, and that California would just be better off governing itself. The question I would say is, why does California, the fifth largest economy on the planet, with all the great educated talent we have here, with not just tech but in general, why do we need a distant capital 3,000 miles away telling us what to do? Aren't we capable of setting our own policies, not just on healthcare, but also immigration, trade, uh, environment like clean energy? A lot of frustration with the denial of climate change. I consider that a really big number one issue. California has been at the forefront of combating that. And like I said, I've lived in other countries. I have friends and families in other countries, and I see how it works better. I think, and a lot of those countries are much more progressive than the United States. I think if California just maybe had the freedom to adopt those more progressive policies, moving from just what we see from our neighbor to the north in Canada, we'd be a lot better off. We're going to talk about healthcare today. There's also a housing crisis. I think that there's better ways of dealing with the housing crisis, like social housing. There's a lot of policies that California could pursue if it had complete control over all of its policies and laws, and also kept its money. We're a donor state, and not so much that we're subsidizing other states, but the money we do get back from the federal government has a lot of strings attached. So they dictate how we spend our money. So it's really about a matter of controlling your own resources, your own destiny. You're making your own decisions locally. Um, Republicans and conservatives are always fond of saying one size doesn't fit all when they're talking about states' rights, and I'm going to agree with them. One size doesn't fit all. So we certainly need much greater autonomy, if not outright sovereignty, um, and that's why I support it. I mean, I do support a continued relationship with the other states. We know that 22 states have joined California's lawsuits, and most of them have been with us all along. Having lived in Europe, and I'm an EU citizen through my father, I think maybe something like that sort of arrangement for North America would work better. That's a much looser union of really sovereign nations or nation states that control a lot of those own policies at their national level. So California, within something like that, like Germany of North America, the federal system's broken. It's not working. It's not working for us. I don't think it's working for really most states, actually. And it's got to change. I support outright sovereignty. I would support a reforming of the federal system into something more like what they have in Europe. That would give us much greater sovereignty over those issues I talked about. Another issue I think is foreign trade. California has a nuclear target on it from North Korea, and they're constantly threatening to nuke Los Angeles and San Francisco, and it's not because of anything California is doing; it's because of what the U.S. foreign policies are. So there's a lot of issues with from Washington that are harming us. And if we could set those issues, those policies ourselves, I think we'd be much better off. And we'll talk about healthcare today, but that's really just one of many issues.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about how I think this conversation got started because we were talking about, if we weren't a donor state and if we weren't subsidizing a military budget, 25 times larger than all of the other nations on the earth combined, or something astronomically ridiculously large.
Right. So the U.S. budget, the federal defense budget, is larger than the next 20 countries combined. 14 of which are allies, or at least used to be. And California's contribution is around 98 billion, which makes us the third largest defense spender on the planet. And that works out to be about 3.5% of our $3 trillion GDP. If we went with the NATO standard, let's say, of 2%, we would be sending $60 billion per year. That gives us $38 billion more for healthcare and infrastructure and schools and things like that. And that would still make us the seventh largest defense spender between the UK and just behind Russia. So we'd still be in the top 10 defense spenders, even if we reduced that 98 billion to 60 billion, or 2% of GDP.
I just want to repeat that for people because, I've been with this for a while, but the numbers are still shocking to me.
Yeah.
Tell me if I'm saying this wrong. What I thought I heard you say was, if we had to not subsidize the American military empire and its adventures, and we still had a good level of defense, like a France or Germany, not a pushover military, we would be saving around $40 billion per year and still have good defense. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, you heard that correct. So at 2% of our GDP, we have a larger GDP than the UK, France, not Germany. We haven't caught up to Germany yet, but Germany doesn't spend 2% of GDP. Our defense budget would, at 2% or 60 billion a year, would be larger than the UK, France, and Germany, and just behind Russia.
And so we would have almost as much military as the United Kingdom, which was involved in Iraq and is involved anywhere around the world, and close to Russia's level of military spending?
We'd be right around Russia's level of military spending, correct?
That's you tell me, but that's not a pushover army, is it?
No, it's not. It's not at all. California would still be, like I said, the top 10 defense spenders. We'd still be a military power, and we don't really have an interest of going around and, being a bully. A lot of these countries you mentioned, the UK, well, I know a lot about that. And of course, the United States and Russia, those are all kind of, and even France, those are all kind of like, imperial countries that are roaming the globe, conquering other countries. California's not interested in that. We're interested in defending ourselves, and that's it. So I think at 2% of GDP, that's more than enough. We don't need any aircraft carriers, which in my opinion are sitting ducks. You've got modern missile technology from Russia, from China, guided by satellites that could wreak havoc to an aircraft carrier. Why would you want to have them? So I don't think California Navy should have a single aircraft carrier. It doesn't make sense. So we wouldn't, you have a 60 billion, and that would be customized to our defense needs. And I don't even think you need 60 billion, to be honest with you. But I just said, 2% is the NATO standard now. So I just said, okay, what's 2% of our GDP? That's 60 billion. That's 38 billion less than we're spending now.
Wow. And if we did not 60 billion, but maybe 50 billion, and had a military that was around as good as Germany or France.
Yeah, you'd still be around Germany or France to 50 billion, yes.
Which would leave us $50 extra billion per year. And that's not including our donor state?
No, it's not.
Wow.
It's not considering donor state, yeah.
Wow. So we're talking easily around $60 to $70 billion per year immediate savings when we leave America and don't have to subsidize 25 states that voted for Donald Trump and hate our values, and subsidize the American military and its adventures around the planet. Am I understanding that, Bob, or am I getting the numbers wrong here that you've been?
I think you're on the conservative side. I think if we look at healthcare savings cost healthcare savings as well by going to a social healthcare system, and it goes over 100 billion. We have to look at the fact that the federal government gives us back anywhere from 70 to 99% of our money back, depending on how you calculate it. But that money, it's not like they give us that money back and we do what we want with it. That money is federal. They call it federal funds, but it's really our money, and they dictate the terms of how we spend our own money. So it's not just being a donor state. It's a matter of what they do give us back. We don't get to really have 100% control over. There's strings attached. So by keeping all of our money, we're also controlling how it's spent.
Tell me a little bit about the savings with healthcare. I'm not well versed on this. I know that the entire modern world in Europe, Arabia, Asia, and the modern countries in Latin America all do healthcare different than what we have now, and it's called a single payer system. And yet, America is the only, I think, country that doesn't do that. You're saying that we could save money if we had a single payer healthcare system and provide better healthcare? Am I saying that right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I did some comparisons with Canada to give you the savings. I sent you an email. I found it on my computer. I could probably present my desktop and show you what I've got. Let me see if I can do that or not. If it'll let me do that.
If you want to just cover the numbers too, whatever you're comfortable with.
Well, let's see. Do you see that my desktop?
Oh, we do. Yeah, nice. Yeah, keep going, man.
Okay, all right. All right, so let's go. So I already gave you my intro about me, so we don't have to do that again. But the reason I chose Canada is, one, I'm familiar with it. I have family there. And actually, I have family the Canadians and also from Ireland that have lived in this country. And some have gone back, some are still here. Not a single one of them prefers our healthcare systems to their systems in Canada or Ireland. Not a single one of them. And I lived in Australia, so I mean, I think it's better. The single payer is definitely better. But I can go through the numbers. So Canada, just to give you a comparison, population around 37 million. California is 40 million. Their GDP is just shy of 2 trillion. Ours is just past 3 trillion. Their healthcare cost per capita is just over $4,800. For California, it's just over $7,500. For the USA, in total, it's just over $10,000 per capita. The Canadian total budget is around $355 billion. Now, California's budget, more complicated. It's $145 billion actual budget plus $376,000, actually, this in quotation marks, federal funds, which is really just our money they're giving back to us,
right?
And they're not giving all of it back. And like I said, there's strings attached to that money.
Yeah.
There's strings attached to our money. They're attaching strings to our money. So that's, Anyway, so another tidbit of information is about 1/3 of California's budget is for healthcare. Another $100 billion is spent by private sources. The potential savings I've got right here, it's based on the per capita California spends less what Canada spends. It's just over $2,700 per person. Times 40 million people is $109 billion per year in savings. Now that's on top of the military money we save in the military. So that's like you're over $150 billion per year in savings.
Whoa. I'm sorry. Cover that last bit again. The potential savings. Right. Walk me through those numbers. Because I've never heard this, and I'm not so great at math. Walk me through those numbers real slow.
So here, the first number, 7549, is the per capita spending by California. The second number, 4825, is the per capita by Canada. The 2723 is the difference between the two, and then times 40 million people, that's our population. That works out to be about $109 billion per year if California went to single payer.
Okay.
Now, you add to that the military savings we talked about, which is like $50 billion potentially. That's now you're almost $160 billion per year. A couple of things that I also wanted to cover, which I think is important, is what's the breakdown of those federal funds. The two largest components of federal funds to California all three, actually, there's three of them, are entitlements. The first is Social Security at over $82 billion. These per year. Medicare, $69 billion. And third is Medicaid, almost $55 billion. So over half the funds federal funds, again in quotation marks, that California gets are entitlements that are paid by taxpayers, payroll taxes that are supposed to be in that trust fund. You know, that trust fund? So this money is supposed to be in a trust fund paid by Californians. So the feds aren't really giving us any money at all. They're kind of giving us our money back, or some of it anyway.
Wow.
California is a donor state by any measure. We talk about that. I've seen averages range from as little as 72 cents, as much as 72 cents per dollar to 99 cents. I believe it's probably closer to 72 cents. And I think it's even greater when you talk about when you consider inefficiencies in healthcare spending, military spending, and you also have to consider the fact that the money we get back from the feds, we don't have control over. We don't have 100% control over. They give it back to us, but there's strings attached. This is how you have to spend your own money. So you have to consider the fact that by exiting, we are not only keeping 100% of our money, but we are keeping 100% control over that money.
I remember a California governor about half a century ago or longer went by the name of Ronald Reagan.
Yes.
Maybe you've heard of him. He used to be governor, and he's on video, I think, talking with William F. Buckley in the 1960s, saying, as governor, hadn't been president yet of America, isn't it inefficient that a state has to pay taxes, ship them to the federal government, ask for them back, meaning you pay bureaucrats out of your taxes to review your request and then approve it to be sending back to you. So you're shipping money to somebody and you're paying for the accountant on that end, and you have to ask for it. And then you get back less than the actual total amount that was shipped to you. Now, he said that in the early 60s. That's almost 60 years ago. Was he right?
I don't agree with Ronald Reagan very often, but I have to say he's right.
On this specific issue.
This issue, yes, he's right.
Okay.
And the whole thing is, conservatives have been saying this sort of thing for decades, and I'm like, well, you know what? I'm just going to agree with them. If they're right, they're right. And on this issue, they're definitely right. Reagan was right on this issue.
On this one.
We're
not saying in general. We're saying this one.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just got to be clear for our liberal audience.
I'm not agreeing with him on everything, no.
Yeah.
But on this issue, he's actually right. He actually is absolutely correct. Some of the other things is to say, well, a lot of people say, well, the healthcare isn't as good if it's a single payer. And I'm like, well, okay, but the outcomes are better in Canada. Canada has better outcomes. And this is true of a lot of countries. Trump mentions Norway. You say, oh, why can't we have more Norwegians? And I think a lot of Americans would really like to have the Norwegian healthcare system because it's even better than Canada. And a lot of other things, too, like family paid leave and free college education. And but a lot of countries are outperforming the U.S. in healthcare outcomes. We're really at the bottom. But the outcomes of Canada overall ranks 30th out of 191 countries. The USA 37. It's not so horrible. Overall health, Canada is much better, doing much better than the USA. Another issue is drug costs. What about drug costs? In Canada, drug costs on average are 40% cheaper. This is largely because of bulk buying, which the U.S. government isn't allowed to do, and I just think this is just the pharmaceutical companies just paid off Congress. But in some examples, it's much worse. For example, insulin costs $70 per month in Canada, $700 per month in the U.S. And I've heard some horror stories, probably you've heard them as well, of poor diabetics. One guy was 26, and this happened so many times. He got knocked off his parents' health care and worked for a restaurant, making $30,000 a year, no health insurance. He died within a month of his 26th birthday because he couldn't afford his insulin. And we hear these horror stories all the time. You don't hear these horror stories in Canada. Now, I understand Colorado just passed a law capping it at $100 a month. And, good for Colorado. When's California going to do that? we need to do that.
I don't like it when California is behind any other state. As a California nationalist, that bothers me whenever I hear about another state was the first to do something that everybody else was scared to try that was really great and a new liberal idea. That's our role. Okay? Don't take that from us. That's what we do.
And that's happened before. I mean, I have to say, I've seen Colorado and Washington State very often. They're first out the door when California really should be.
Yeah.
And like this on here, I mean, good for Colorado. I mean, they capped it at $100 a month.
Hey, we as Californians, I love California, but we as Californians, clearly looking at your information, it looks like we got to step it up. We have to step up our game. We're not doing everything we can. That's on us. That's on us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we should be capping insulin right now. It's $100 a month, I guess, is okay. I'd like to cap it at 70 like Canada. But anyway, but at least 100. At least cap it at that. And So now the other argument is that this is socialism. You're going to be like Venezuela, blah 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 blah. Always hearing Venezuela. Well, actually, Canada has a richer middle class than the United States. And in fact, Canada and a number of countries, including Norway and Denmark, rank top 10 highest quality of life on the planet. The USA does not rank top 10. Okay, so socialism, my butt. Oh, if that's socialism, then give it to me because they're doing better than us. And I think the people that yell and scream socialism are the oligarchs who want to have to pay for this stuff. We talked about defense spending already. Don't really have to go over this again. I have some numbers here, just a comparison, saying that at 2% of GDP, we would be 60 billion. The UK spends 50 billion. So you mentioned 50 billion. If we went with 50 billion, we would be matching the UK on defense spending, and we would be still not that far behind Russia. I mean, the UK still thinks it's an empire. That's probably why they're spending 50 billion. They're not, but they still think they are. Anyway, Canada spends 21.6 billion of its, which is 1.3% of its GDP on defense. So, California doesn't really have enemies. I mean, the UK's got a lot of enemies because they still got some possessions, and they're running around like the USA's lapdog, going to Iraq and they're probably going to go to Iran too. Who knows? So I mean, they have to spend so much money because they run around like the lapdog, pretending they're still an empire. If Canada doesn't spend that much; they spend $21 billion.
Let me ask you about that. If we had we had talked about having 2% of the GDP, the NATO standard, but if we had our defense budget equal to at $21.6 billion, and that's all we spent, how much money would we be saving? We become
over 70 billion a year. Over 70 billion a year.
70 billion, 70 billion a year.
70 billion per year, over 70, about 75 billion per year.
Tell me if I'm saying this wrong. I think you said we could have a military as awesome as Canada's, again, not a pushover, and we could save $70 billion annually?
Yes.
Wow, that would do a lot to paying for single-payer healthcare, correct?
Sure would. Also, like I said, there's over 100 billion in savings just adopting the Canadian model. That's it. So that's 170 billion, almost 180 billion.
Whoa, repeat that. Walk me through that like I just heard this real quick. What did you say? 100 plus 70. Where does that come from? Where do we get that number?
Okay, so the 109 billion. When we come back up here, is right here. Okay. That is from looking at the per capita cost of Canada versus our per capita cost. The difference is 27.23 per person, and times 40 million people. That's a savings of 109 billion. Okay. If we adopt the Canadian healthcare system.
Okay. And then that's 109 plus
75 billion, about 75 billion. If you reduced our defense spending to match Canada, you'd be saving an additional 75 billion. So that puts you like 180 or over 180 billion per year, just on those two things.
So $180 billion to Californians with no additional imposition on their economy if they adopt the Canadian healthcare and Canadian military.
Yeah. Just give me a second. I'm talking to someone. All right. Okay. Sorry, I got technical difficulties. What were you saying there, Marcus? Hello?
We can save $175 billion each year if we adopt the Canadian military and healthcare system. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. That's correct. The other thing that I might want to add, and it's not on these notes, is that since 9/11, the United States has spent over $6 trillion on the war on terror. California contributes about 15% of the federal budget. That means our contribution, that's $900 billion, almost $1 trillion. And so, you look at that and what we just talked about with following the Canadian system, saving $180 billion a year. And then people talk about California having a debt problem. And I'm going to say, quite frankly, California doesn't have a debt problem. California has a drunk Uncle Sam spending money like a drunk sailor problem. That's what we have. We have a drunk Uncle Sam sailor spending money like a drunk sailor. problem. That's what we have.
We almost have spent. I want
What's
you to
that?
say it if you can. I'm saying this again. You're saying California by itself has almost spent $1 trillion
Yes, since
on the
9/11.
war on terror.
Yes, correct.
Wow. I didn't again I study this stuff. I didn't know that. I didn't know the savings were that high by having a Canadian style healthcare system, and we could make 175 extra billion dollars with no extra taxes just by borrowing the Canadian system for the military and for healthcare. And then we've
Yeah.
already wasted 900 billion, almost a half slash, almost that number with the T, on subsidizing a war that's gone on 17 years with no signs of ending.
No, yeah, exactly. It's going to continue going on. The other thing I want to point out is that we have to consider the effect of boycotts of our goods and services by 1.5 billion, 2 billion Muslims alone over U.S. foreign policies.
Right.
You often hear about people boycotting U.S. products and services because of our foreign policies, and quite frankly, I don't blame them. And how does that affect California's economy? Boycotts. How about these trade wars? Those trade wars are hurting everyone that Trump has launched. How about going after with the immigration restrictions? I mean, I can tell you, our economy from agriculture to tech, and I know tech very well, depends upon immigrants. Shouldn't California be able to control its own? As an independent country, we control our own immigration policies.
I think some of the numbers were. I know that. Besides the 1/5 of every human on the planet being Muslim and probably not wanting to buy American-made products, when President Obama, it was revealed that he had lied to everyone about spying on cell phones. People in Germany were quite upset with that in 2014, and there was, because Europe alone decided to not buy cell phones primarily made in California in 2014, that was $6.7 billion in losses. And that was just Europe, which is a fraction of the global population. I can't imagine how many billions of dollars we're losing by missing 1 in 5 people on Earth not wanting to buy California products because they're tied to the American label.
Right, we're guilt by association. We're associated with U.S. foreign policies.
Yeah.
So it's guilt by association. Even though most Californians don't support these policies, it's guilt by association.
Hey, we pay for them.
Pay for it. We're paying for them. Sure,
yeah, I mean, we don't. Hey, I protested it too, but I still pay taxes, and that meant I still funded drone strikes on people, families, with my money,
me too, right?
And they did it in my name. And until we're independent, we're going to be continuing to fund this, and it will still be in our name. Am I getting that wrong?
It is, and I don't know that North Korea would ever nuke us, but I mean, you've got that Kim guy constantly threatening to nuke Los Angeles and San Francisco, and he's not threatening to do that because they're California cities. He's threatening to do that because they're U.S. cities.
Right.
He's not threatening to nuke Vancouver. Has he ever threatened to nuke Vancouver? Have you ever heard that? I've never heard him threaten to nuke Vancouver.
Exactly.
Even though Canada's in NATO, Canada still pretty much minds his business, right? So I've never heard him threaten to nuke Vancouver.
Good point. No threats for Vancouver, plenty of threats for Los Angeles. What's the difference?
Los Angeles, San Francisco, I've heard him threaten both those cities, yes.
Yeah. So now we're wasting $1 trillion on a war on terror, which only makes everyone mad at us. And there was a terror attack here in San Bernardino that was directly related to a reaction to the war on terror. So we're having Californians get killed because they're part of the American war on terror, which we did not agree with. And then you're saying we're under the threat of being wiped out, nuclear genocide, because we're associated with America and they have gotten into a fight with North Korea. Am I getting that right too, Bob?
You're getting that right. And look at Trump, as unhinged as he is. I mean, we're like a tweet away from LA and San Francisco being wiped out. Seriously, I mean, maybe I'm being melodramatic, but think about it. I mean, we could be like literally a tweet away from both those cities and really most of California being wiped out. Not because we rejected him 2-1.
Well, yes, and I still remember that when Obama was president, North Korea was still upset with America, and
Yeah,
still talking about how they
both
can
parties.
launch a nuclear missile on the West Coast.
Yeah, and California doesn't necessarily have to be neutral. I think that's open to discussion. But even if we just adopt the same benign foreign policies as Canada, I don't think we'd be threatened. And Canada's in NATO, so I mean,
Yeah.
you could go neutral if you want. You could go like more benign, aligned but benign. Like Canada, you can go Mexico's neutral. You can go that way. You can go aligned but benign. So we say, like Canada. So
Yeah.
either way, you're going to take that nuclear target off your cities.
And Canada was in Afghanistan. I remember that. Canada was in
Right.
Afghanistan, but they didn't join Iraq.
That's right, they didn't. Correct.
So they sent their girls and boys into harm's way. They had body bags come back too, but they did it based upon there's clear evidence you were hit by Afghanistan, and it doesn't seem that they're a target for Islamic terrorists, even though they did participate in a war. I think, like you're saying, they were limited. They did their part. They did their duty when they were called upon, but they didn't go and seek adventure.
Right. Right. So I think that's California can go either way. It can go the Mexico neutrality or Swiss neutrality, or it can go Canada aligned but benign, sort of thing. You can go either way. But I think as long as you stop being such a bully around the world, you won't have that threat.
So if we're independent, we don't have to worry about nuclear weapons landing on us because we're not associated with America. We don't have to worry about Islamic terrorists. We could have Canadian-style healthcare, which is better, and save $109 billion. And we could have a Canadian military, which is still solid, but doesn't seem to paint a target or entice the Islamic world to attack them, and save an additional $70 billion. So better healthcare, no threat of being nuked, no threat of a terrorist attack, and $175 billion extra dollars? Am I getting that right?
You get that right. And of course, there's other things like control over immigration, control over trade policies. Think about how much billions of dollars we're losing over this trade war. I mean, it's stupid. I don't think California has a problem with China trading with China because our economy is so diverse and unique. What sector of our economy is China threatening? Maybe they are, but that's not the right way to deal with unfair trade practices like what Trump is doing. And it's got to be costing us billions of dollars per year, this trade war. What about the ripping apart of families? I mean, that's just cruel and inhumane, but it's also negatively affecting our economy. These people are valuable parts of our economy. I can tell you in the tech sector, his threats to the H-1B visa, tech companies are not going to hire unqualified people. I wouldn't hire them. What's going to happen is those jobs are going to Canada. Talk about Canada. You know what? Justin Trudeau, who's a million times smarter than Trump these days, he's coming down here and saying to tech companies, saying, "Oh, you need some visas, do you?" And Donald will give them to you. Well, we've got some great tech parks in British Columbia, Ontario. We'll give you the visas. So tech companies, which are international companies, they may be based in California, but they're international. They can send those jobs anywhere. These are jobs that require a certain skill level. Now, I think the way to solve the H-1B problem is we have to do a better job in our schools, in those STEM skills. We should be doing a better job. We shouldn't need to import so much talent for the companies. And I have a lot of ideas. I taught for 10 years in the Cal State system, so I have a lot of ideas on how we can reform education. That's another topic we talked about maybe at a future time. But if we fix our education system, we wouldn't be so dependent upon the foreign-born talent. But we're always going to need some. And to go and say, I'm cutting back on the H-1B guys, and now you hire Americans, the tech companies are going to be like, these guys can't even spell computer or turn one on. Half the people that walk in for an interview. And that's because our school systems are terrible. They're stuck in the 19th century agrarian society. They need to be reformed.
Can you go back to the full screen of you? It's on the screen with the text.
I didn't hear what you said.
Can you go back to the screen of you? So you're like a small screen and the text is a big screen? Just so the audience can see you.
You see me? Did I do it?
Yes, sir. So you were you were saying again about how we're losing labor?
Well, yeah, because what he's doing in immigration. First of all, he's deporting people. A lot of these migrants, these undocumented workers, they're working in agriculture. California's the #1 agriculture state. We need them. And of course, farms in the other states are suffering too. But also, he's threatened tech on the H-1B visa. So what is that doing? Now, for every tech job that's created, they're very high paying, they generate 2 spin-off jobs. So for every H-1B visa Trump says no to, and he's saying no to a lot of them, that's 3 jobs. And typically, the other 2 spin-off jobs would go to a U.S. citizen or an American person. The H-1B obviously is going to foreign talent, but that's because our schools aren't creating the talent. But the tech companies are not going to hire someone who's not qualified, period. Would you? So what they're going to do is they're going to, like I said, Justin Trudeau, who's a million times smarter than Trump, is coming down and telling our tech companies, you need visas? We'll give you visas. How many visas do you need? And we've got some Vancouver, beautiful city, British Columbia, Toronto, we'll hook you up. He's coming down and saying, we'll hook you up. Yeah, no, Donald's a dumb.
Yeah,
we'll hook you up. We'll give visas.
I don't like that he's doing that, but he's playing the game. He's just being a good prime minister to his people.
No, I don't blame him either. I mean, why shouldn't they? Why shouldn't they?
Hey,
why shouldn't they? I mean, these tech companies, they need the talent. And like I said, our schools are broken. They need to be fixed. And I'm a big fan of making college education free. I don't think that's enough. I think we need to try and encourage students to go into the STEM fields because that's California's economy. Especially California should be encouraging this, the STEM field, because that is we have a knowledge economy. We need those type of people, and I'd like to see those jobs go to as many Californians as possible too. But we have to educate them first.
I hear you. That's going to be the issue.
The education reform is a big issue too. Yes.
Okay, we're nearing the end. Any last comments you want to make? Things that you think people who, let's say it's a skeptic, they are here, they like it here, they support our culture. They don't like everything we do, but they like the culture and they don't want to go anywhere else, even if it is tough here. And what would you say to them on why they should join or believe in the idea of Calexit, and what would be your pitch to them? And if you want to loop in, hey, good healthcare, that works.
Well, what I would say to them is that by controlling all of our resources and setting all of our own policies, we get to customize those policies that works for us instead of a one size fits 50. I mean, how does a one size fits all policy out of DC that going to work equally well in Kentucky and California? And to conservatives, I would say, well, you guys have been saying for decades one size doesn't fit all, and also what we're saying to you is, well, we agree with you. You're right. One size doesn't fit all. So we need to be independent so that we can have a California size.
Oh, I like that.
Right? Do we need a Kentucky size, or do we need a California size? A Kentucky size for this, an Alabama size for that, a Missouri size for something else, or do we want to have a California size for everything?
I have to say, because the Mexican side of my family is Tejano from Texas, and they always go on and on about big like Texas. Well, damn it, why can't we have a California size? You all too small. We need it. We're the ones that need it bigger. We need a California size.
We don't want a Kentucky size. We want a California size.
Yeah, I don't want an Alabama size. I want a California size.
Yeah, we want a California size. So one size doesn't fit all, and we want to have a California size.
Okay, I'm going to end it there, and I'll send you the video as soon as it's up.
Okay, great.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, good talking to you guys. Talk to you. Bye.